and Strack. Frank Zaccanelli has been in the world of domestic and international business and professional sports for 40 years. And as a former minority owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, he's been asked to comment on current events and national news for most of his professional career. Zacc Strack has worked as a reporter, videographer, graphic designer, anchor, and producer at Fox News, CW, CBS, NBC, and Time Warner cable stations across the country for more than 12 years. And no matter where she landed, her search was for the truth. In a time where journalistic integrity has come to be questioned, people are looking for a place to find just the facts.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for this Thursday on To Be Frank show with Zacc and Strack.
I'm Zacc.
I'm Strack. We're excited for you to be joining us this Thursday, and as always, we're trying to bring you a place to find just the facts.
Well, it's a busy news week, to say the least. I mean, that would be the biggest understatement, Sarah, maybe in the history of statements. I mean, things are brewing on about 27 different levels, and we're going to try to cover what we think today are the hottest stuff. But, when we were putting the show together, I think you'd agree, we could have come up with, 20 different topics.
Oh, yeah. We had to try to go through and see what we could eliminate. That was the issue. It's never for a lack of content.
Yeah. And again, is that content good from a news standpoint, from a show standpoint? The answer is yes. But there are a lot of problems and issues that come with all of that, and we're trying to break it down. Again, this show is really based on a non-political, non-ideological view of the news. That's why I started it last year. That's why Sarah's doing the show with me this year, is that we're really trying to figure out, how to give people information, let them make up their own minds. Obviously, it comes with opinion, because you can't do a show without opinion.
Right.
But our opinion is not based on being paid by advertisers or having a producer that is telling us what we can and can't say.
It's based on experience.
That's right.
And we're not playing the game, if it bleeds, it leads. We are not doing that. We are trying to bring you what we think are the top stories that you really need to know.
You know what the biggest problem on cable news is?
What?
I don't even think it's on network news as much, but on cable news, all these talking heads are paid to say what they say. They're not necessarily paid by the network, but they're paid by their constituency, their jobs. They're either the president of this or the director of this, and they really have a following in which they have to follow.
Yep.
And, Sean Hannity's probably the biggest abuser of this. There's only about 8 talking heads that he'll even let on the show. And they feed the narrative. Now, again, I like Sean Hannity as a person. I don't line up with him, Mark Levin, politically on a lot of stuff, Tucker Carlson. But at the same time, I don't line up with Anderson Cooper. I don't line up with Wolf Blitzer. I certainly don't line up with Don Lemon. Tell you a funny Don Lemon story. That was one of my best interviews. I was on CNN on his show, and they were talking about when the kneeling was occurring in the NFL.
Right.
And they brought me in, and we had actually, and he couldn't have been a nicer guy.
Really?
Yeah. It's just politically,
Well, you're a true independent, and that's why this show works great. So.
Well, I hope so, but, let's see how good it goes today. Let's
All
get
right,
on with the show.
All right, well, we're going into our first segment of live news. All right, so we are talking air travel. So in the news over the past 6 months, year, 2 years probably now, you keep seeing all of these issues on these flights where someone gets out of hand, a flight attendant has to come and deal with the situation, and a lot of it has to do with COVID, masks, and just the heightened stress, I think, on these airplanes. Something just recently happened in the news.
Well, if you remember last show, we covered the fact that flight attendants are taking martial arts classes now for self-defense, right? I kind of made a joke about it, but it's serious stuff. Well, there's a new issue here now, and I believe we have a little B-roll on it, but a belligerent passenger was hauled off a United Airlines flight to LA after threatening his fellow flyers with bodily harm when told to don his mask. I mean, this is what we're dealing with.
Right. And that is, I feel like consistently those videos keep coming up. And because everything is surrounding what's going on with COVID, with these masks, you know, like you said, flight attendants are now having to figure out how to practice self-defense, and now we're seeing all of these stories of shortages of pilots and flights. You know, we just had, Southwest just canceled 1,800 flights, they said because of weather, but then all of these pilots are coming out and saying things about how they're refusing the mandate, so all of this stuff is happening, and we have a video of that if we want to play it.
Yeah, let's play the video.
Yes, my motive for resisting it is primarily religious for myself. Basically, I saw, among my friends, I saw a need. Many of us don't want to take this. People were being coerced. I believe in freedom, and I'm here to support the freedom of my fellow employees and all people across this country. I'm not going to take a mandate. I'm not going to be coerced into doing something that I don't believe in.
So to add to the story a little bit, as part of this latest incident on United's flight to LA, the flight attendant also asked this crazy man, if you will, to hang up his phone 4 times, and he wouldn't do it. And so I think that maybe an answer to this, I'd be a big proponent of this. File federal charges against every one of these people and make it public and let people know what happens when you don't abide by the federal laws on airplanes.
Yeah.
I'm a guy, again, masks are important, I believe, on airplanes because of the central system that is the air system. And I would not be opposed to having a vaxxed airline versus a not a vaxxed airline. Again, these are just personal preferences. Everyone has their own preference. But if you file federal charges against these people, maybe you make it public, and maybe then they understand there are consequences to their actions.
I would agree with that. I think that no matter what, if people are taking a flight, you are buying a ticket onto this airline, as it stands right now, these are the rules, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with them or don't agree with them, these are the rules. So when you get onto a flight, you have to listen to those rules.
But Sarah,
it's just like on the road.
I know, but Sarah, these aren't even like American Airlines rules. These are federal rules.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Whether you agree with them or not, if you're getting onto a flight, you are making that conscious decision to follow those rules. Just like when you're getting behind the wheel, you're making the conscious decision to get behind the wheel, and there's rules to follow on the road. So I agree with you. I think that if people are disobeying and they're told, given a warning maybe once, maybe even twice if you want to let it go that far. But I agree. I think if someone is causing an issue, and look, flying is stressful for so many people for so many different reasons. Now that I'm flying with a child, I'm always heightened,
right.
not just because of safety, but also because I'm trying to not have the baby cry. So I think everyone a lot of people stress out when they fly, and then the heightened level of COVID now just completely adds to it. So,
and we're seeing more and more of this. So,
I have a question about that. Do you think we're seeing more and more of it, or because of social media and just because of the news and everything like that, that we're just seeing more of it? Do you think this has always happened?
Well, not always, but
Yeah.
I think these mandates have only been in place, like put the mask on, right. COVID, don't cough on me.
So you think it's just heightened?
My biggest problem used to be when the guy used to put his hand, into my space on the seat next to me. That was a problem.
Right.
And then the kid kicking the seat behind.
Yeah.
That was a problem. Now we've got new problems.
Okay, I'll tell you something. A secret. I was on a flight probably 6 months ago, and there was a man 2 seats over flossing. I got video of it, so I'll have to show you, but he was flossing on the flight, mask down, and even pre-COVID, I don't want someone flossing right next to me. It was kind of gross. Yeah, it was a problem.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye on this again, because there seems to be a repetitiveness to this that we'll watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, our next story, Gabby Petito, we are seeing that now the homicide has turned into, we have figured out the reason, strangulation. That is what the coroner has ruled it. And the person most likely who will be arrested for this will most likely be charged with first-degree murder, whoever that person is.
All right, well, let me stop right there. If it's not this laundry guy who's on the run, I should go up with Shatner on the next space flight, okay? This is ridiculous now.
Yeah.
This has gotten to the point now that I want to be for 10 seconds unplugged on this. But the FBI didn't make a good decision by not detaining this guy. Who else killed this girl? And now we find out she's strangled. Now this guy's on the run. He could be in Russia for all we know.
Yeah.
His parents must know a little bit more. I think they've got to lean on the parents a little bit more. This is just a breakdown, in my opinion, in the system.
I agree. And just in case you didn't know the backstory, Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie were traveling cross country trying to see the state parks. They were engaged, and Laundrie came home with her vehicle, and she did not arrive
And
home.
her credit card.
And her credit card. And he has not been seen now since September 13th. So it's been now over a month that he hasn't been seen, and the FBI have charges against him for federal fraud for using her credit card, but as of right now, he has not been charged with any kind of...
Well, in order to charge somebody, you got to find them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's bounty hunters and all of this stuff. But we have a clip that shows really well another coroner kind of talking a little bit about why strangulation obviously automatically leads to homicide and why they figured out it was strangulation.
All right, roll the clip.
The coroner knew on day one when the autopsy was done that it was strangulation and that it was a homicide. They delayed a couple of weeks before saying it was a homicide. There's no reason not to have said that it was strangulation. The reason I say that is because shootings, stabbings, blunt injuries to the head, they can be accident, suicide, homicide. You got to get more information before you come to a conclusion that it's only a homicide. Whereas with strangulation, you can't strangle yourself. You can strangle, but not to death. So that had to be known right away. And the reason you know it is because of the injuries to the skin and underneath the skin and to the hyoid bone and windpipe. So that's identified at the autopsy. They knew that right away for whatever reason. It's not clear from what the coroner said. They kept it a secret. The perpetrator knew what he had done. They wasn't hiding any information from the perpetrator. And one of the things that's attracted me so much to what's going on is how much information has been gathered by crowdsourcing rather than by the usual forensic science techniques.
Right.
They saw the argument on the street, in the roadway, they saw the van, they found the body. All came from crowdsourcing. And the more information is given out of even this strangulation now being documented, maybe somebody out there will be able to contribute additional information as to how this happened, since the coroner himself is going to say.
I mean, that just makes me feel so poorly for her and so badly for her that this has happened to her. Like he said, I mean, you can't strangle yourself, so obviously she was murdered. And I feel like I just cannot believe that he's still missing.
Yeah, well, again, I think there's a breakdown. There's no question in anyone's mind, I don't think, that he killed her. And the fact of the matter is they got to find this guy.
Yep.
Now, there have been fugitives that have gone 10, 15, 20 years before they find him.
Right.
And sometimes they don't find him. When you've got a guy who's a person of interest, somebody's going to have to explain to me what that means.
Right.
But a person of interest, keep an eye on the guy.
Yeah.
I think that's the lesson
Don't let him
learned.
back out of the state.
I think that's the lesson learned.
I think so too.
All right.
All right, so our next subject, we are talking about the vaccine mandate and the economics that are behind it. So we're going to start off with a video first. Biden was talking about the vaccine and said this.
My message to unvaccinated Americans is this. What more is there to wait for? What more do you need to see? We've made vaccinations free, safe, and convenient. The vaccine has FDA approval. Over 200 million Americans have gotten at least one shot. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us.
So look, I understand the idea behind wanting to keep people healthy, right? But What I don't understand is taking away the personal choice from it, especially considering even if you are vaccinated, you can still pass along the virus. So whether or not, and I don't think it's anyone's business whether I personally am or am not, but I think that what he's doing with these mandates is he is messing with the economy. Hundreds of thousands of people are without jobs, going to be without jobs because of this, which gets into the supply chain, which gets into the middle class paychecks, which is ruining, our dining system and hospitality system. And
Right.
it's just, I feel like it's a complete snowball effect. I mean, air travel, we just talked about it.
Yeah. I'm not for mandates in a general sense, but, there's two sides to this story. The side that you just laid out is 100% one of the sides. The other side of it is, and I'm not for this, but I'm just trying to give both sides of this, is that the government has to step in when people, quote unquote, don't do the right thing. Well, that becomes problematic from the standpoint that now government is big brother putting their hand on things. I'm vaccinated, I'm getting the booster, I'm all for vaxxing, and I don't have a problem with it, okay? And we're going to get into a discussion about Kyrie Irving, the basketball player, the NBA player for the New York Nets. And we're going to get into that subject, which ties directly into this. But the fact of the matter is, for some reason, the Biden administration feels like they have to mandate things. I don't see that their mandates are really doing a hell of a lot. It looks like COVID now is starting to regress. That's the numbers that I see. That doesn't mean it's gone away. It doesn't mean it's not coming back in the winter. But I think some of the numbers over the last couple of weeks have basically, been a little bit better. So I'm not for mandates. I think the government makes a mistake when they start mandating too many things. And there are economic consequences to these mandates.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we said, the supply chain boosts inflation, consumer pricing goes up. It's killing the middle class, like we mentioned, paychecks. Biden issued an emergency standard where OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, is mandating vaccines or regular testing for companies that have more than 100 people.
And that's the biggest economic issue that I see. When you're mandating the testing costs a lot of money.
Right.
These testing companies are probably ecstatic with this.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so a company has to choose whether or not they want to allow their employees to continue to get testing all the time when they need it, or they want to continue to push the vaccine, and that's going to leave people leaving jobs. And I know we have another story in Double Take where we'll talk about the sheer amount of people who have left jobs just in the month of August. But again, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's just unbelievable the amount that this is messing with our economy.
Yeah, again, mandates as a rule, I'm not for them. I understand the COVID scenario, but I'm not sure we're accomplishing that much, and I think we're doing probably a little bit more damage than we're doing good.
Yeah, I agree. All right, moving along to the Afghanistan interpreter, Biden's interpreter, who is now back in, has escaped Afghanistan, a long trek through Pakistan. Frank, what are your thoughts here?
This is a big one for me, and I think we've mentioned before that we're going to keep this story in the news. We are going to keep it in the news. A lot of the mainline news people are not keeping this in the news,
right.
And I think that's a tragedy. Think about if you had a family member there. Think about if a loved one was there.
And people just stopped talking about it.
It's a real problem. Help me say this guy's name. His name is Aman
Khalili.
Khalili.
That's how I've heard it pronounced.
All right, Khalili.
Yeah.
Aman Khalili.
His name was Muhammad, and then he actually changed it.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. He was the interpreter that rescued Biden in 2008. Here's the irony of all this, right? He now comes out and he says that it is terrible in Afghanistan. The Taliban is being as heavy-handed as they could possibly be.
Yep, and they show, quote, no mercy.
He used the word no mercy. And we have a clip on this, but I want to just talk a little bit about the fact that this is really a meltdown for the Biden administration. And the reason is you can't publicly say we're not leaving until all Americans are out and the Afghans that have helped us are out. Okay? I still want to know, all right, how many Afghans are there? How many Americans are still there?
And how many Afghan allies?
And how many allies are there? The communication problem with the White House that I covered, I thought, in detail last show, is a gigantic problem here. Hold news conferences, tell people what is going on, the progress or lack of the progress, because I think this administration's position is if we just ignore it, it's going to go away, and it only gets worse. Again, this is not getting any better.
Right.
And you look at the poll numbers around this issue, they are disastrous. I want the Biden administration to be not only more transparent, but more communicative. I think I talked some about that.
I think everyone does.
I know, but I talked about that in my Unplugged last show, is that you can't, you're making things worse by not explaining it. And he walked out of another news conference yesterday that he held on the ports and all the issues that I'm going to cover in my Unplugged section today. He walks out again when they're screaming questions at him. You know, answer some questions about what's going on.
Or what you said last show, put someone out there who can and will.
And I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I am not trying to pick on Joe Biden. What I'm trying to do is say that anytime that you don't communicate with the American people, especially with all of these crises going on, you make a big mistake.
And that's exactly what happened, I believe, in Afghanistan. And I think everyone is starting to recognize it. Even a Pakistani airline suspended Afghan flights because of what the Taliban is doing, because of their heavy-handedness. Meanwhile, the Taliban is promoting the fact that the U.S. is agreeing to send humanitarian aid that's basically going to help fix their economy because they're in such a poor disarray of economics while they're there. But, I mean, that is because exactly what you're saying, we pulled out without a strategy.
Right, but also the messaging part is so bad, okay, that we get ourselves into a situation where we're trying to understand, you know, how many Americans are still there, right? And just tell us, you know, just let us know what this is. And then if what Aman is saying is correct, the conditions there are not good. And you want to talk about another big messaging problem for the Biden administration? The State Department should stop calling these people professional.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not professional. They're terrorists.
I mean, he says in the video that they have no mercy, that they are heavy-handedness. I mean, these are terms that are being used by Pakistanis, people who are over there and dealing with the situation right now. Let's play the video.
Yeah, let's play the video. But I want to say before the video runs, this is not a partisan issue. There are as many Democrats as Republicans that are really upset with this. So this is not a partisan issue. This is an American issue.
Yep.
All right, roll the tape.
Thank you for being here. I'm so happy to talk to you after you were able to make it out of Afghanistan. Can you tell me about your journey?
That's cool. It was as important unimportant as to reach us in Doha without support and help of us. The teams, they started from anywhere, they helped me. But we came as here as with a lot of scary and threats from Afghanistan. Especially I was in the desert 24 hours without nothing. The speed of the drive was 120, 150 per kilometer hours. But we reached at the border and crossed the border safely. There was a team, they helped me. It took us 10 minutes to the other side of the border. We crossed the border as very well. Then we get on another track. It took us 3 hours to another location. Then they stopped us and get off, and they hired another 2 vehicles. It took us 4 hours and a half to the heart of the city in Balochistan. Then they hired another 2 vehicles. We started our trip to Islamabad. It took about 14 hours drive. It was a very fast drive, and it took the drive was like this, 150, 160 kilometers per hour. It was very dangerous way, and there was a lot of checkpoints. They were asking us, the drivers and me. I had kind of as ID with myself. but I repeat my name and my father's name and the location where I am going and where I was.
So Amman is a little bit hard to understand, as you can see, and that tape was a little bit longer maybe than we wanted, but I felt with Sarah it was important that you heard the whole scenario from him. I mean, this again, here's the irony. This is again the guy that is credited with rescuing Joe Biden, our president of the United States, in 2008. This is not just some other guy.
Right, some other interpreter.
Yeah, this is like a main guy.
Yep.
And when he tells the story about what's going on there, it's just, it's horrific. It just is horrific.
After helping the United States to not have a situation where they have been evacuated or taken to safety, I mean, that just is shocking. I mean, to me, it would make me think, if I was seeing all of this going on and I was seeing someone pulling out, it would make me think, okay, well, in the future, I'm not going to help. Why would I help? What benefit does that have to me? You're not going to take care of me.
Well, that was the big issue with our allies. You know, what message did we send to our allies? But again, I promise you, with all the people that I've talked to and I know you've talked to, this is not a partisan issue. This is an American issue. This is not Republican, Democrat. This is an American issue. And I will be very happy in the day when we know that all the people that were supposed to get out have gotten out.
I hope so.
That's my hope.
Yeah. All right, well, moving along, Jamie Dimon, we are talking Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. He said on Monday in a virtual summit that Bitcoin was worthless.
Well, he called it a fraud earlier.
He called it a fraud. He called it stupid. He called it dangerous. I mean, he's had some strong words about Bitcoin.
He called it a fraud. And Warren Buffett and his people at Berkshire Hathaway are not big fans of Bitcoin. Here's the problem. I don't understand. I'm a pretty good investor. I've been around a long time. I don't understand the Bitcoin scenario.
Well, it's extremely. Full disclosure, a little while back I was looking at.
Are you buying Bitcoin?
No, I'm not. But, I mean, I probably should, right? But no, a while back I was interviewing for a job where I was going to be a reporter on cryptocurrency. And I had to do so much research. And I've been a reporter anchor for 10 plus years, and trying to understand how the blockchains work, how the supply works, how the currency works. I mean, just trying to understand it was so confusing. But those who do understand it and do use it and do trade in it love it because it's not federally regulated.
Yes, but in my humble opinion, and I am not an expert in this category, it's the greater fool theory. And the greater fool theory is all about, I buy it for a price higher or I sell it for a price higher than what I bought it for, so therefore it's a currency I'm making money on. You remember 2 shows ago, Sarah, I know you remember, but I did a deal on the 3.5 trillion. And I did a layout that talked about what Richard Nixon did in 1971. In 1971, he took the United States off of the gold standard. And they started printing money. There is no standard for Bitcoin. What is the collateral?
Well, that's what I mean.
Now, maybe there is some, and I don't know about it.
Well, to me, there's no brick and mortar. You can't feel the coins in your hands, and that drives me nuts. And but those people, again, who understand it, seem to love it. If they, bought into it years ago, then that's huge. Especially this year, Bitcoin nearly doubled and is 12% below the all-time high that was 65,000, which was earlier this year.
Yeah.
So if you bought in at the right time, I mean, you're making bank, and Bitcoin to you is not stupid.
Well, I got to be honest. It's not something I know a hell of a lot about. Jamie Dimon is smarter than me or 99% of the people. If he thinks it's BS, you should weigh that into your decisions. At the same time, though, JP Morgan, that he's the president of, which is one of the largest banks in the world, obviously, they're still selling Bitcoin and buying Bitcoin for their customers.
And they have a JPM coin.
They're bookies.
He must find some value in cryptocurrency.
They're bookies.
I feel like our producer Holden would be a really good person to talk about this.
Holden would be good, yes. All right.
Awesome. All right, well, now we're going to take a look at Double Take. All right, so of course, Double Take is where we have a timer of 2 minutes, and we have a buzzer now that we're going to have to actually listen to. And we are going to basically talk about a subject, 2 minutes. Sometimes we'll agree, sometimes we won't.
Is the buzzer there for you or me?
I don't know.
Okay. All right, because this buzzer just showed up, and they said, "Oh, there's a buzzer now." So I'm wondering, is it for me or you?
I think we've both gone over,
right,
depending
okay.
on the subject.
Well, you said 8 minutes last time.
Oh, 2 minutes.
I checked it. No, you said it. We went 8 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
We only went
right?
4 minutes 10 seconds. I checked it.
Hey,
All
that's
right.
better than 8,
yeah,
right?
that's better than 8.
All right, so the first subject, Matthew McConaughey. So there are so many, I guess, rumors swirling about him running for governor. He said he's weighing out the options in his mind. Thoughts on him?
Well, I think it's real simple. First of all, as an actor, I think he's a very good actor. He's from Austin, Texas. He's a big University of Texas sports fan, and he's got a really good-looking wife. That's pretty much what I know about him.
The important things.
No, pretty much what I know about him. His quote was, "What the hell is politics? Before we start saying, hey, this is where I stand on an issue, which would alienate half the voters, let's answer these other questions about the purpose of our democracy, also calling politics a bag of rats."
Okay, so I'm going to piggyback
said
off of
that.
I'm going to piggyback off of what you're saying, because he called himself a philosopher and a poet more so than a politician. And a lot of times I think that businessmen make better, quote unquote, politicians than actual politicians, just career politicians, because I think that having someone who knows business in a position.
But this guy's an actor.
But this guy's an actor, but not to say he's not smart in the business world.
He's not Warren Buffett. This guy's an actor.
Right, right. So, and he's been real kind of cagey on talking about where he stands, and I think.
Well, he doesn't want to tell anybody. He says, "I'm going to alienate 50% of the people."
And your quote.
Well, can I tell you what? No kidding.
Yeah. Well, and your quote and my quote, I think it kind of goes to show I don't think he'd be the right person for Texas.
Well, I think that's an understatement. but I mean, the bottom line is, he's a great actor. I'm sure he's a good guy. He's a big supporter of the state.
Guy.
He's a really good supporter of University of Texas athletics. I don't think that it's a serious thing. I mean, as I go through all the stuff, we'll have to see. We'll see. We'll give him fair treatment on the show, but I don't think it's very serious.
I just can't see Texans voting him in. And actually, a poll recently came out that said he's a UT and Dallas Morning News poll said he's polling better than the governor right now. And I'm interested, who makes up that poll?
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on it.
We'll keep an eye. All right, so the second subject, we are talking about unvaccinated patients who are getting an organ transplant. Hospitals have the ability to take those people off of the transplant list. Okay or not okay? Start.
I'm for.
Okay.
I'm for. And the reason I'm for, and I've made some notes here, so I'm going to read these notes. For a living donor, the person that's actually given the organ, reducing the risk of COVID infection around the time of surgery and recovery is very critical. Mm-hmm. Infection is everything, okay? For the actual transplant candidate, they have enough on their plate taking this new organ. So I'm actually for this. I don't see that this is obtrusive in any way. I don't think this is overly heavy-handed. I think it's commonsensical for me.
So I'm split in my brain. So part of me completely agrees with you. I looked at a stat recently that said the mortality rate for a COVID and transplant patient is 20 to 30%. That is so high for a person who's getting a transplant and then gets COVID.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on that end. And as a hospital, they have the ability to make the decision that they want to. You know, most of them are private entities, and they can make that decision.
Right.
Now, the other part of me, the principle behind healthcare, and we talked about this last time, you know, if someone doesn't have healthcare and they go and they have, you know, they're hitting a car crash and they're going into the hospital, what are we going to do? Turn away and not help them? So my mind goes to the same principle. Are we just not going to help someone who needs a transplant?
It's not about turning.
But wait.
Yeah.
But the other thing, I think that doctors have been saying that they won't treat patients who are unvaccinated, and that goes to my mind thinking, okay, then are we not going to treat people who have lung cancer and smoked all their lives? We're going down a dangerous hole.
All right. But the point of the matter is, if you go into a hospital today, a good friend of mine, Mikey, broke his leg, his tibia, and his fibula. I was there with him when the doctor came in and said, we have to operate. I hope you're vaccinated. That's what he said.
Yeah.
If you're not vaccinated, we have to go through a bunch more stuff. We're still going to operate on you, but it's a lot more complicated inside the hospital.
Yeah.
So I'm for this. I don't see anything wrong with it. And I think hospitals are trying to be careful.
I don't know, I'm still split. All right, well, our next subject, we are talking California. Governor Newsom signed in a bill that says that all public high school students need to take an ethnic studies course before graduation.
Go ahead.
All right, so this is kind of another one that I'm split because I kind of think that's a great rule in general to learn ethnic studies and to have that in the school system. I mean, I took ethnic studies in high school and I think it's so great to learn about other cultures. The one thing that kind of threw me off a little bit was that it's only marginalized ethnic groups. So if I wanted to learn about Italian heritage and go into the ethnicity behind being an Italian, I mean, why can't I learn about that? So that was something that kind of threw me off. It's only African American, Asian American, Latino, and Native American.
All right. So my position on this is that the proof is going to be in the pudding. What do I mean by that? It's how they teach the class, okay? The basic premise of, teaching it, I don't have a gigantic problem with. I think the more that our youth understands people's ethnicity, maybe we can cut down on some of the racism that is embedded and is out there.
We are a melting pot.
Let's assume that's the case.
Yeah.
The problem that I have, California right now could screw up a 2-car funeral.
Yeah.
Okay? They just find a way to really screw things up.
Always.
I think that if they could figure out how to teach the class properly, but let me give you another one. Newsom signs a law that is banning gas lawnmowers. And no, I'm not making this up. I cannot make this up.
Not cars, just lawnmowers.
No, gas lawnmowers and gas lawn blowers.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, because quote unquote the emissions and everything else.
Wait.
By
So
2024.
You can still drive a car with gasoline.
Of course.
But not a lawnmower.
No.
The 20 minutes that you have it outside.
2024, January 2024, he signed a bill that's banning this. Oh, let me give you one more though. There's actually another one.
We're going over on this one.
Yeah, we're going over. But the problem with Gavin Newsom is that he is of the same mindset that a lot of very progressive people are. More government, more intrusion into your life, more us telling you what to do, more mandates. It's just not the road that I think the majority of Americans, even in California, want to go down.
Well, why are so many moving here? So many Californians are coming here.
Lawnmowers.
Yeah.
Now we're in the lawnmowers. Okay.
I'll tell you what. Can't make this up.
Can't make it up.
All right, so we are talking about jobs now. 4.3 million people quit their jobs in the month of August. That is the record number since the Labor Department started tracking since 2001. So, I'm going to say a couple things before we get started. People have quit to find better opportunities or quit because they just don't want to deal with a bad situation anymore and wanted to look for something else. Thoughts?
Okay, so I'm for anybody that quits their job that could get a better job. I'm for anybody that's out there that can improve the lifestyle of their family. I think what is embedded maybe in this, and I don't know this factually, but my instincts are telling me that the stay-home giveaways had some to do with these numbers. Yeah. I mean, I can't think about it any other way. And in my Unplugged segment, which is going to be about this disaster that we have at the ports and shipping and everything else, what's clear is that is really being isolated down to not having enough truck drivers. Now, I don't ever remember being in a situation, Sarah, where we ran out of truck drivers. But we're pretty much out of truck drivers, and I'm going to get into that whole thing in the Unplugged.
Yeah.
So I can't help but to think that the impetus of stay home and we'll pay you didn't have some to do with this, but I can't factually prove that.
I agree with that, and then I also think another prong is that when people realized that they can work from home and then everyone's getting, vaccinated, or people are, things are opening back up. People want to come back to work. They're realizing, oh, wait a minute, I can find a job where I can stay home. I'm going to quit, or I'm going to go work for myself, or I'm going to be a contractor, or I'm going to do this. I think people are realizing, and I also think the millennial age group, which technically is my age group, but a little bit younger in general, I think that most people are saying, I want to work remote. I want to be a digital nomad. And if my company doesn't want me to do that, then I'm going to leave. And I think that big companies especially, are really struggling with that, because people are realizing they can work from home. People are realizing they can work digitally, and that's that.
Yeah. Well, again, should people earn as much as they can earn? I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I'm for the average guy who's out there feeding his family, sending his kids to school. I think the real issue is, again, if you pay people not to work, I know me at 24 years old, I might have stayed home.
I know. I just don't think it's a good precedent to set.
Right.
All right. So our next subject, and we're kind of going to marry two. We're going to sports, right? So we are talking about in 2000, an email from 2011. We're talking about John Gruber's email. So in 2011, an email was leaked that was the Raiders coach, John Gruden, emailed Bruce Allen, who was the GM at the time of the Washington Redskins, during the NFL lockout, talking about DeMaurice Smith. And he said, quote, "Dumb Boris Smith has lips the size of Michelin tires."
Yeah.
And it's been, talked about that it's a racist email that's out there. So this kind of double take here is, do you think he should be fired?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
He couldn't work for me.
Yeah.
That's abhorrent. It's really, really bad. And, this is the underlying problem, I think, that people have in the black community, is a lot of this stuff is kind of swept underneath. The second that email was sent, he should have been called out.
Right.
And don't forget, he worked for ESPN for all those years. He was kind of out of coaching. He then goes back into coaching. Here's a guy that was getting paid $10 million a year to coach.
Yeah.
And he won one Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They, interestingly, have taken him out of the Ring of Honor, which I would have done.
Yeah.
But there's no excuse for this.
Right.
This is blatant disregard for culturally where we should be in this country. And I'll tell you a statistic that really bothered me. In his coaching career, and for those football people, they know he's around a long, long time. He basically only hired one black assistant during all those years, and the guy lasted for 2 years. But he did not have a track record like a lot of coaches, right? Like Bill Belichick or Nick Saban, of hiring a multitude of people and then bringing them along in the ranks and everything else. He really only hired, it looks to me like he only hired white guys. And, that went by the boards too. So you've got to ask yourself, the people that he was working for, what were they thinking? Was there a highlight to this? I was in the professional sports business. 80 to 85% of the athletes are African American. Okay, that's just, in the NFL it might be 75. I know in the NBA it's higher. But it's just a problem. We just can't treat people that way. We can't have people at the helm that are talking that way, and it just really takes away from how great the sport is.
I agree.
Now, we're going to go a little over.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're going to do one more double
I want to
take.
talk about Kyrie Irving.
Yes.
You don't have to reset the clock, but as people know, I was in the NBA for 4 years, and I was the president and general manager of a team, minority owner of a team. You face issues all the time. Kyrie Irving is a top 10 player in the league.
And
Make
has
no
decided
mistake.
not to get the vaccine.
Well, but if he lived anywhere except for New York and California, it wouldn't even be an issue. See, this is what bothers me about that. I understand what Sean Marks did, who's the GM, and Steve Nash, who I was part of a group that traded for, and I've become, very well acquainted with Steve Nash. I know Steve pretty well. He and I are friendly with each other.
Yeah.
He's the coach, but he has had to say, look, we can't really have this in and out. You play some games, you don't play. That's the worst situation in a locker room that you can even get to. Kyrie Irving is in this position because he plays for the New York Nets. If he played for the Dallas Mavericks,
this wouldn't be an issue.
This wouldn't even be an issue. And so I think that has to be looked at. Now, Kyrie Irving is a very high-maintenance guy, and the long and short of that is that, you know, I'm concerned about the long-lasting effect of this, and I hope that this situation gets worked out, but I don't see how it's going to. I think the only solution is to trade him to a place that they don't have these mandates.
I was going to say, because I don't blame him for making a decision and choosing to not get the vaccine if he doesn't want it. But I agree. I feel like the fact that he's in a place where he can't play unless he gets it is just really unfortunate.
But I don't blame the Nets. I don't blame Steve or Sean Marks. They did what they had to do to try to get their team ready to play the season, because they are the undeniable favorites to win the NBA championship. That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know. All right, now we are going into Frank's Unplugged.
Okay, we're going to talk today about a subject that has been in the news now pretty regularly for the last week or so, month or so, depending on how connected to the news you really are. President Biden held a news conference about this yesterday, and it's the global supply chain, I call it nightmare, the global supply chain problem. Now, for those of you that are out there, this is not a U.S. only, Biden administration only problem. This is a worldwide problem, and it's being caused by a lot of the after effects of COVID. And we're in a situation right now to where when you drill down, the ports are backed up with goods that are coming in just to the United States, but this is happening around the world because there is a lack of truck drivers that basically are there to pick these supplies up and ultimately deliver them to the final point of this distribution network. I learned a great lesson early in my career. I was involved with Ross Perot Jr. and the Perot family, and we built the finest industrial airport maybe in the world, Alliance Airport, out in North Fort Worth. And one of the tenants that we did bring in, but we were courting, was Federal Express. And the guys at Federal Express said to me, why don't you bring everybody? Ross went, everybody went, and see our night sort and see how a package gets from your house to somebody else's house in a different state by 10 o'clock the next morning. So we loaded up, we had dinner, and we went out to the facility. This is literally in the middle of the night. At about 11 o'clock at night, it looked like an airlift. I mean, 100 planes landed within an hour and a half of planes full of these goods that ultimately are Federal Expressed around the country. And the process of the sort and re-putting them back on airplanes that would take off no later than 4:30 in the morning, it was amazing to me. Because we walk into a supermarket, I got a list that somebody gave me, my wife's yelling at me, whatever, get this, get that. And we walk into a grocery store and we just expect the stuff to be on the shelves. Well, I got news for you. There's a lot that goes behind the scene that creates all of this. Well, what we're seeing now is a breakdown in that distribution network simply because the supply chain is being affected by COVID and then the lack of these truck drivers. And it's a real problem because it is backing up the whole system. It is backing up the whole system. And it's not just in the United States. This is not, because I pick on everyone equally, and I pick on Biden on some stuff. This is not necessarily a Joe Biden. He didn't cause this problem. This problem is a byproduct of a lot of what's gone on around the world the last 2 years with this COVID scenario. And then, of course, again, how we have a lack of truck drivers all of a sudden it can only lead me to one angle, and that is that people don't want to work anymore. They don't want to, again, maybe these truck drivers were collecting, federal money. I don't know what the issue is. But all of a sudden now we have this gigantic gap between the amount of truck drivers that we need and the amount of truck drivers that are there, that are backing these ports up. Because when you bring these big ships in, Port of LA, Port of Long Beach are two good ones. These ships have to be unloaded, and it takes, a couple days to unload some of these big cargo ships. I mean, I've seen the whole process. It's unbelievable when you really watch it. It's distribution worldwide at its highest level. Well, what's happened now, though, is because of this crisis, prices are going up, more inflation is going into the system, and we're getting in a situation to where we're just not in a good spot with this right now, not only in this country, but worldwide. Roll the tape.
So we got a second crew passengers.
FedEx _8 red pines.
To understand the problem on the ground,
542 is ready for takeoff.
you first need to see it from the air.
We're flying right over the anchorages just south of the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach.
This is where the global supply chain meets the U.S. economy, says Coast Guard Commander Stephen Bohr.
It's record-breaking. It's unprecedented. There are more ships than there are parking spots. We are effectively operating a cell phone waiting lot in the Pacific Ocean.
This bottleneck of container ships, as far as the eye can see, carries more than half the made-in-Asia items purchased by the American consumer.
You're looking at all of the electronics. You're looking at all of the home goods. You're looking at all of the things that people are looking for.
Okay, so that kind of gives you a visual of what's going on at the ports. And again, there are a lot of political pundits on the right that would like to blame this on the Biden administration. They didn't act quickly enough. They didn't do all this. All that's fine. You can look at this any political way you want to look at it. What people need to understand, this is not isolated just to the United States, like our border issue or like the Afghanistan issue. This is completely different. The problem that I'm dealing with in explaining any of this is, though, the president holds a press conference yesterday on this specific subject. And the thing that really came out of the press conference, the most notable, I think, is that he announced that Long Beach and LA and other ports are now going to start operating 24/7 around the clock to try to clean up this backlog. That's a good decision. Now, should that have been done 2 months ago? Probably. But, the bottom line is that's a good decision. Again, this is a worldwide problem. This isn't just a U.S. problem. And there are some that are out there. We use our guy Jamie Dimon again on the Bitcoin guy, JP Morgan's chairman. He believes that this will fade away by the start of the year next year. Others do not think this is going to fade away, that this is going to be a longer lasting problem. But the key for you, the viewer, is that the net effect of all this is going to be that prices are going to rise. It's a supply and demand curve. So when you go into the supermarket and you're picking up a bottle of milk or a piece of cheese or a loaf of bread and you're seeing all this stuff and you see, hey, the prices are up, this is part and parcel to what's causing a lot of these price increases. And it's not good for the consumer. Inflation, as I mentioned last show, is rising steadily. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. But the bottom line is the Biden administration's ability to communicate. Let me use it that way. If you watched Joe Biden's press conference yesterday, and there was nothing wrong with his press conference, but at the end of his press conference, instead of staying there and answering reporters' questions, and he could have just said, I'm only going to answer questions about this supply chain crisis. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about that. Instead, he finishes his remarks and he walks out again, and people are screaming at him. And he's going out the door, and it's a terrible visual. And the visual for this administration with these poll numbers have got to get better. So the bottom line to this is this. The consumer, you and I and everyone involved out here, we're going to be paying a little bit more for our goods and services. This has a lot to do with the inflationary curve that's going on. And I hope that Jamie Dimon is right, that this is going to solve itself by the 1st of January, Because if some of the reports that I read are true, this is going to get worse before it gets better. And Sarah, I think that's really not good.
So by the 1st of January, why is it going to get better by then? Just because the ports have been open 24/7?
I think that the trucking companies are on a mission now to get truck drivers. The lack of truck drivers just blows me away. It's a business that you make a really good living at.
Yeah.
You know, what I read when I was really studying this subject is that they make between $55,000 and $75,000 a year. Now, they're on the road a lot. They're away from their families.
Sure.
There's a lot of issues, but that's a pretty good living.
Well, and then what started that shortage?
You know, there's nobody that I can either read or talk to that ultimately can give me a straight answer. I think it was, again, the COVID, whole scenario where things shut down. People didn't work for a while, then they didn't want to go back to their jobs, then they got paid. I'm sure all of that is connected.
And the vaccine mandates on top of it.
I don't know that the vaccine mandates have much to do with it, but they could. I would generally say, though, that there's a lack of drivers to drive these trucks. And you could bring as many ships into a port as you want.
But if no one's going to pick it up.
If you can't get it picked up, then you're just defeating the whole purpose. And again, if you see the visual, out in the port of Long Beach and the port of LA, there's probably 60, 70 big cargo ships that are sitting there for days. How much does that cost?
Yeah.
How
much money is that wasting?
How much is that cost? And so, I only say, I told the Federal Express story for a reason, because we live in a society where we just think everything just happens. When I saw early in my career that night sort, I was blown away. It stayed with me for my whole business career that, holy cow, this is a logistical thing that allows for some of the things that we appreciate in our daily lives. Again, you walk into a supermarket. I mean, everything is laid out for you.
I walked in Monday and I was shocked at the amount of stuff that was missing, and I just assumed it was because it was Monday, a busy weekend or something, but now kind of hearing all about just all of the supply chain issues that are going on, I'm like, well, I guess it's gonna happen.
And I'll give you another one now. I mean, a big discussion that's going on inside the people that are talking about this is that Christmas is gonna be really upside down, because toys are not going to be able to get to the stores, and there's a whole different, thing here. And we rely on a lot of that stuff. We rely on the Far East for that, China and other places. And so, that's all a shipping related issue. And China, with all of this, is having their own problems. Like I said, this isn't just about the United States. And this is not one that I want to pin on the Biden administration. The only thing I can pin on the Biden administration is the fact that their messaging and their communication, I'm going to hit this every show, is so bad that if the president is not up for these questions, send out Pete Buttigieg. Okay, I hope I said his name right. Buttigieg. Yeah, send him out. He's the transportation guy. He's in charge of all this. Have him answer questions. Give people a comfort level that, hey, because what ends up happening when you don't address issues, people make up their own minds. And see, in business, I don't like it. And if I was a politician, which I am not, it would bother me even worse.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head that they need to be more transparent, because something needs to come of this.
Yeah, and again, people are going to feel it in their pocketbooks, and they're going to feel it in their inability to get certain goods and services that they're used to getting.
Well, hopefully, in prayers, by the end of the year, something changes.
Well, let's say Jamie Dimon's right, so Merry Christmas.
Yeah, hopefully. All right, now we are taking a look at your top headlines. Well, this week, United Airlines was ordered to pause their plan to give unvaccinated employees unpaid leave if they requested an exemption. NPR reports a Texas federal judge ordered the delay, and the airline said in August that all those requiring a medical or religious exemption would be placed on unpaid leave. 6 employees filed a lawsuit saying this was, quote, adverse employment action. The case is set to be heard at a later date, and the restraining order expires October 26th. And Kyrie Irving will not be playing until he is vaccinated. According to NBC, the Nets have benched Irving until he is vaccinated. On Instagram, Irving said, quote, "I am doing what's best for me. I know the consequences here, and if it means that I'm judged and demonized for that, that's just what it is." The Nets have said that players will not be paid for missed games. And first responders are still fighting a wildfire tearing through Southern California this week. The fire covered more than 24 square miles, according to the AP, in West Santa Barbara. 1,300 firefighters are battling the flames. More are on the way, and the fire is only 5% contained as of yesterday. And we're learning more about the Gabby Petito homicide. The Grand Teton County coroner said Petito's death was strangulation, and according to Fox News, a former prosecutor said they will likely result in a first-degree murder charge for whoever killed her. Brian Laundrie, her fiancé, is wanted in connection with her death after traveling across country with her this summer and showing up back in Florida without her. He has not been seen since the 13th of last month. And new offshore wind farms are expected to be developed in the Gulf of Mexico to help generate enough electricity to power more than 10 million homes by 2030. The AP reports in a statement Wednesday from the Biden administration, 7 of these wind farms would produce 30 gigawatts offshore and could avoid 78 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. Those who oppose the operation say it can impact local wildlife and is not always the most reliable energy source.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, the wind farms.
It is.
Yeah.
They're ugly.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And you go to Palm Springs and you leave Palm Springs in the canyon and you're on your way to L.A. and you see 9 million of them.
Yeah. We see them out in Abilene, too.
I had a really smart person, a very creative person say they should paint them a different color. They shouldn't be white. Paint them into the backdrop. Brown, green, something.
Or paint them like very cool, like graffiti, and make it
I don't
an
know
art
about
project
graffiti.
of some
We got
sort.
enough graffiti. We've got enough graffiti. But to make them a little bit go away, they are eyesores.
Yeah. Well, the issue to me also is especially that it's unreliable, and it's great that we're pushing to greener, operations, greener sources.
What do you mean when you say it's unreliable?
Unreliable because they're not always operating at the same
But they're an additive to our grid system.
An additive, but you can't just have that. You can't say, okay, oil and coal are going away now.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. But I think in the present economy, they're a good additive.
Sure.
And, in Palm Springs, again, which I have family, there's grids even for housing where everybody goes into the same grid. They save a ton of money. It really works pretty good if it's organized.
If it's organized, and I think that a push for greener energy, I think is great. But if you don't have a plan in place when things don't go as expected, I mean, you're gonna have the whole issue like we had here in Texas.
Right.
You're gonna have the issue that California has all the time because they're trying to do solar energy, and solar energy cannot be saved and harnessed. So my sister was living in California, and they were getting alerts. Okay, turn off all of your appliances for 3 hours, or turn off your lights for the next 4 hours. And I mean, it's just so you have to have a backup. So, but I think I don't see a problem with it.
No. Well. Last thing for me, just getting back to one of your headlines, the Kyrie Irving thing again. The unfortunate thing about this, and I'm a basketball guy. I mean, I was in the league for 4 years. If he played anywhere else except where he plays, he'd be fine.
It wouldn't be an issue.
That's the inconsistency in all of this. If the NBA really wanted to try to centralize this a little bit, they would have fought the fact that New York and California have taken this, what I consider to be ridiculous position. That's a ridiculous position. The guys out there on the court, they get tested every day.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Now it's put the Nets, who are again now, they're not just some average team. They are favored in everybody's polls to win the NBA championship this year. It forces them in a position now where if I'm the head guy, which I was at one point, I've got to be looking at reasonable offers to trade him.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to go the season without him and not getting compensation back.
Right.
So that's where now your whole discussion about mandates in New York and this and that, it's just not consistent.
Yeah. Well, and it's unfortunate because it's, like you said, if you played anywhere else, this wouldn't be an issue, or if you played in other places. Do you think they're feeling political pressure to make those decisions, or do you think that's a decision they want to make?
They?
The league or
the league or the Nets?
The Nets.
the Nets have to live by what the city ordinances are telling them.
Yeah.
And, they're kind of a byproduct of having to deal with, Billy D. de Blasio, the worst mayor in the history of mayors. Not even a question. Mayors anywhere around the world, he's the worst, my opinion. I pick on him all the time, but he is an open book in terms of being able to pick on him. I mean, he's done, so this whole thing about, in order to play in that building, you have to be vaccinated. It's just not consistent.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
All right. Well, that's our Thursday show. We're really excited about the show. We're gaining like crazy in terms of views. I expect the third show is going to be the highest so far again. It's just been the pattern. Tell people how they get to our show.
Don't forget that you can find us at To Be Frank Show on Facebook, on YouTube. You can either search To Be Frank Show, or you can, of course, go to our website, To Be Frank Show, or To Be Frank and Sarah is the website. And then there's links to the Facebook, the YouTube, a little bit of information there as well.
Spotify, Speaker.
We're on Spotify, we're on Spreaker, we're on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Play, basically anywhere that you will listen to your audio platforms for podcasting, we're there as well.
Right. Monday and Thursdays, we do the show twice a week. We'll be back on Monday. In the meantime, follow the news, watch our show, take care of your families, stay safe, and we'll see you on Monday.
All right, see you Monday.